This piece is called She Shell Sanctuary, and it's based on a body of work that I've been doing, which is to do with mental health and immersion in nature. And I actually came to it because when we first moved down to Brighton, I used to sit by the sea, and it was a great sort of grief release, just sitting by the sea on my own and just talking into the sea. And then as you're talking, you're sort of playing with the stones and picking up shells and things. And I started to pick up oyster shells in particular because they've just got this incredible kind of history, like lived history. Each kind of layer is a particular stage of their life, which is just so interesting. And then I started thinking about the nacre, which is the inside, like the mother of pearl. I painted it blue here, obviously, but it's and how that kind of protects the oyster within it, and how that's also what makes pearls when a grain of sand gets trapped. And I just really got super interested in the oysters and their lives, and how these shells are just so incredibly strong and resilient. And it got me thinking about grief healing, which is really the kind of skeleton, or the basis of my work, which is how to use my work to heal from trauma and grief. And the oysters are just really beautiful. They're so, each one is different. I've made a few works with oyster shells, but this one in particular, this commission, I used a lot of different shells, some from the beach, some that were donated to me. I think there's over 700 in all. And I hand washed each one, which felt quite devotional in a way. Just sitting washing them really, gently one after the other. And then painting them with earth pigment, so all of this will go back into the earth, back into the soil. It won't harm the soil. And I just started thinking about how each oyster shell felt like a milestone in a way, and relating it to my own grief journey, where I just literally had to take one day at a time after loss, and just thinking, when will this one day become more days? Will I ever feel any better? And I started to see these oyster shells as actually tiny time capsules, and moving forward, and actually, building a cairn or a mountain, and actually overcoming that, walking up that mountain, or building this cairn, like a cairn of care I've used, which I think is a lovely terminology. And it's kind of like a monument in a way to that journey, but it's also creating like a really beautiful safe space where people can come and sit and just be quiet in the landscape and in nature, which is where I started to find some real mental peace and calm. So I love the idea of people coming to sit in it and just listening to the birds, being in the environment here up at Dyke, which is just so beautiful and quiet, and just being immersed in nature, away from worries of everyday life. And the reason I painted it blue kind of underlies a lot of my recent work. I use it psychologically and spiritually. So for me, it's a colour which is, really connective. It's really spiritual. It's historical. And I'm very much about kind of sensuous connections with my materials and my colours. So the blue, ultramarine blue it's based on, is a colour which is quite expansive. And I always feel like it's kind of infinite, like the sea and the sky, infinite. So from someone who, like me, who came from doing work which was all kind of somatic, based in the body, kind of very inward looking, trying to heal myself, my grief journey by looking inside, all of a sudden I felt like I could look outside and be a part of a bigger nature, and that in itself was incredibly powerful. And the blue just has this resonance, this energy to it, which is like life. It's, it has this incredible life and vibrancy to it, and you can't help but be uplifted when you're surrounded by it. So the idea is that people come and sit in this grotto or walk around it and just and be uplifted by the colour, because it's, especially on a day like this, it's so sunny, it's just stunning. And it changes over time with the light. And I like that. I like change, the thought of change, nothing being stagnant and static. And just kind of, I like the idea that people can touch the shells and just think about, their own lives. So yeah, it's quite an important work for me, and it's the first large-scale installation that I've made as part of my practice. And in these spaces here at the sheds, old agricultural sheds, which have got a real amazing lived history as being part of the land, it's kind of incongruous, but it also it sort of marries with it in a way. Here in Sussex, the geology is chalk, and chalk is made from compressed marine life. So although it might seem incongruous, actually the chalk that we're standing on is compressed marine life, which will be made up a lot of oysters and oyster shells. So there's some kind of beautiful symmetry with, the fact we're standing on history, we're standing on this kind of marine biology, and then I've kind of brought it back in this form. I would say it's quite a generous work in the sense that I would really like to think people will get a lot from it, that it'll make them feel just a little bit of calm in their everyday life.